is going to be worth $5 trillion by 2030. That's a pretty mind-blowing statistic, but it also makes sense. The creator economy as of 2022 was rated at over $100 billion. The creator economy is going to continue developing, and corporations and brands are going to continue digitizing more and more and more as we have this interoperable global ecosystem that everyone can tap into. The way that you tap into this is through your digital identity. The way that I think about a digital identity is that the internet is kind of like a game, but so is life. Life is kind of a game, and we are the players in our game. If we're able to see ourselves as the main character, then we're able to play the game of life. And the game of life has two different sides to it. Hello, my name is Callum, also known as Wanderloots, and welcome to Recalibrating. This is a series where I explore the ever-changing nature of reality. With change being the only constant in life, it makes sense that the more we can become comfortable with change, the more we'll be able to find balance and harmony within our own lives. I'm referring to this as my recalibrating experiment, where I'm testing out different ways of living since I quit my job as a lawyer, an intellectual property lawyer, and a patent agent, and I decided to pursue a life of creativity. In my previous videos, I talk about why I quit my job and how I have been recovering from burnout. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit more about what it means to generate a story, and to continue from the last video, where I talked a lot about the continuity of self, how we can develop our own self-story so that we can live life in a fuller way, in a way that allows us to self-actualize, to become the best version of ourselves. And that brings us to today's topic, digital identity. And to help you understand digital identity, I thought that I would go through three major aspects of it. The first is why you should care, the theory behind what a digital identity is and why it matters to not just you, but to everyone in the world as the world continues to get ever more digital. Then I'm going to talk about what a digital identity is and how people generate value through their digital identities. And finally, I'm going to go through some practical steps on how you can actually build your own digital identity and connect it to the personal brand that you've probably been building in your life already as part of your in real life identity. Over time, the ability to tell this story to generate value through a particular identity, both in real life and digital, can form information and data and knowledge and creation that forms a basis of intellectual property that is an asset that will continue building for the rest of your lives. So let's get into it. In the last video, I touched on story and the value of story and the concept of the hero's journey, how each of us in our own lives are the hero of our own story, unless we're operating on autopilot, unless we're operating based on the expectations of others, in which case we're not really the hero of our own story, we're instead some non-player character that's operating in someone else's story. I also touched a little bit on the power of the internet and the fact that we're able to now present our story to anyone, anywhere in the entire world. And because we're able to connect with anyone, anywhere, we're really able to begin accumulating an asset that we can build off of for the rest of our lives. We can generate value based on our unique perception of self and who we are as our own main character, and how that value can be presented to other people. As part of this generation of value that we're able to share on the internet, it's very important for us to consider, when we have an idea, how we can execute on that idea, and the execution of that idea is sharing it with other people. And unfortunately, many people, including myself, we struggle with overthinking, with overanalyzing, which can lead to burnout. And the time between the idea generation and the execution of the idea gets larger and larger and larger the more I overthink it. As the world begins to change faster and faster and faster with artificial intelligence, one of the most disruptive technologies that we've ever experienced, the ability that we have to shorten that time between the idea and the execution is going to keep improving. The more we're able to generate data from our past selves and project that into our future, the more we're creating data that can also be fed into our own personal artificial intelligence system that will help us improve our value and our expression of that value for the rest of our lives. And this value generation and plugging into a personal artificial intelligence applies not just to creators, not just to writers, not just to artists, but also to knowledge workers, to people who think for a living, which is most people. And as part of this thinking for a living and this generation of value, what most people end up doing, and this is related to the topic of today, is they develop a personal brand. A Personal brand is really a continuous story of ourselves that we've shared with other people so that they know who we are and the value that we have to offer to other people. So over time, our experiences accumulate and they build, our knowledge accumulates and builds, and it forms, as a culmination of this experience and this knowledge, a projection of ourselves that are how other people perceive us. And this perception by others effectively develops a brand that we can then use to increase our income over time. In the corporate world, this happens by gaining experience and moving up the corporate ladder. In the creator economy, this is done by building an audience that appreciates my particular value, the brand that I've built and projected online. The thing that all of this has in common, everything that I've talked about so far, is the concept of identity, of self. And the more that we're able to understand who we are and what our self is, the clearer we're able to tell the story of that self and share with other people. What's pretty wild is that in the last 30 years or so, the way that we're able to share that brand, the way that we're able to tell the story of ourselves and share the value that we are generating with other people, it has completely changed with the internet. With the ability to project our story, our value, our data, anything we want to, across the internet to anyone, anywhere in the world. And perhaps even more importantly, when we present that data and we put it out there, it stays there. It sits there operating in the background where anyone can find that information at any time. So even if they're in a completely different time zone, they can still get access to the story that we're presenting, to the brand that we're putting out there. Over the last 50 years, the value of intangible assets in the stock market has gone up by 430%. We've had a shift in how people perceive value that goes from the physical to the digital, to an intangible, something that doesn't have physical form, but is more based on an idea that other people understand and have attributed value to. This comes in the form of intellectual property, including patents, trademarks, and copyright, as well as goodwill, which I'll talk about a little bit more when we get into branding, but also through software, through data sets, through artificial intelligence. All of these assets are intangibles. They're not physical form. They are something that has received value by virtue of other people valuing it. As of 2020, the breakdown between tangible and intangible assets is now at 10% to 90%. 90% of the S&P 500 gains value by virtue of intangible assets. That's a pretty mind-blowing statistic, but it also makes sense. The creator economy as of 2022 was rated at over $100 billion. McKinsey predicts that the metaverse, not Meta as in Facebook, but the overall global internet and the next iteration of it, which I'll get more into in another video, they predict that the metaverse is going to be worth $5 trillion by 2030. So the creator economy is going to continue developing, and corporations and brands are going to continue digitizing more and more and more as we have this interoperable global ecosystem that everyone can tap into. And the way that you tap into this is through your digital identity. It's the projection of your physical self, the tangible version of you, into the digital world, the intangible version of you. Now, if we look back at that chart, we can see that the biggest jump in terms of the distribution of tangible to intangible value came between the years of 1985 and 1995. The internet. The internet allowed us to transfer value in a way that we had never had before as an entire species. Throughout the whole history of humanity, we have never had this power before. So it makes sense now that more and more people are continuing to digitize. More and more people are figuring out ways to transfer value online. And the way that you transfer value online is through data. And to help understand this, I figured I'd give a definition of data. Data is a collection of discrete or continuous values that convey information describing quantity, quality, fact, statistic, or other basic units of meaning. And I want to draw your attention to two parts of this definition: values and units of meaning. Effectively, the internet enables us to communicate value and meaning by the medium of data across the world to anyone, anywhere, anytime. So in a sense, the data that we're able to generate, that we're able to tie to our digital identity, and we're able to project across the internet and share with anyone, anywhere, that is the generation of value. But why do people value it? Why is one photo worth $2 while another photo is worth $1,000? Why is one NFT worth $1 and the other one worth $1 million? Value is a set of shared beliefs that other people attribute value to that good or that service. Value is in the eye of the beholder. So the more that you're able to have more people behold your value, the more your value increases over time. And the way that you do this is by generating data as part of your digital identity and sharing that value with other people. This is what brands do. Corporations, brands, trademarks, they generate a set of values that they then project, they share with the world that increases the public's perception of them. It generates goodwill. And over time, the public's perception, if they're doing a good job, increases, and so does the value of that company. In a sense, the brand is generating a myth around that name, around that potentially trademarked name. They're generating a story that is shared amongst all of their consumers or their admirers, their audience. And that shared story is a myth. Most people think about myth as something fantastical, something from thousands of years ago. And while that is true, it still applies in modern society. If you think about it, money is a myth, right? Why is a piece of paper worth $1 or worth $10? Well, it's because enough people in the world believe that that particular piece of paper or plastic or whatever the currency is has value. And of course, it increases in stability over time if that particular currency is tied to a government like the United States or Canada or the euro. And the more people believe in the value of that particular asset, the more stable that value becomes over time. This is also why cryptocurrencies have value. It's not necessarily because they have a physical value, but it's because enough people in the world believe in the myth associated with that currency that it gains value over time. This is also very much how the stock market works. There's certain characteristics that people use to determine how valuable a particular stock is, but at the end of the day, it's really up to the psychology of the masses and who's buying and selling the stocks to determine how valuable things are. The same thing works for branding. The reason that one brand performs better than another is because more people believe in the myth behind that brand has a certain value that the audience has come to appreciate over time. For part one, I want you to remember that intangibles are getting increasingly more valuable. The distribution is 90% to 10% from intangible to tangible. The digital world is increasing in value. And the reason that this increases in value is because people have shared sets of beliefs that certain intangibles have more value than others. And for you, this is applicable by the consideration of your own personal brand. What are you doing, both in real life and online, that is generating goodwill, something that other people look at you and they think, oh, that person has value to share? And what are you doing with that value? When you take this personal brand, this myth of Callum, this myth of Wanderloots, I'm able to then connect it to my digital identity online across Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, YouTube, Substack, LinkedIn. There's so many different facets, so many different parts of this digital identity that I'm able to project onto the internet and have different aspects of myself projected from in real life online. So now let's get into part two. What is a digital identity? So the way that I think about a digital identity is that the internet is kind of like a game, but I mean, so is life. Life is kind of a game, and we are the players in our game. If we are operating on autopilot all the time, we are perhaps not the main character of our own life, which I talk about in the last video. But if we are the hero of our story, if we're able to see ourselves as the main character, then we're able to play the game of life. And the game of life has two different sides to it. There's the physical side, which is in real life, my physical body and where I live, the current country that I'm in, Canada. But there's also the intangible side. There's the digital version of my identity that I'm able to play as a character online. You can think of it as a projection of myself, of yourself, online so that other people can see whatever it is you want them to see. Whatever the story is that you're sharing online enables them to see that story and begin generating a shared set of beliefs about who you are. You can think of it as a player in the creator economy. You've projected yourself online to play the game that enables you to interact with other people, to generate your personal brand, to build up your digital identity, and to generate value that other people appreciate. And the more you're able to do this in alignment with your physical self, with who you are as a person, the more you're able to maintain a continuity of self, the more this digital identity becomes a natural projection of who you are. So not only does your digital identity allow you to play the game of the creator economy, but you can also think of it as the character or the avatar that allows you to enter the metaverse. The metaverse you can think of just as the overlap between all of the digital communities online and how people are able to move between them using a single digital identity. And this could, in the future, it will, involve some virtual reality component. It can involve an augmented reality component. There's going to be artificial intelligence. The way the metaverse is developing, who knows where it's going to end up, but that's not the point. The point is that it's projected to be worth $5 trillion in 6 years. That is such a massive increase in value in the intangible realm. It's kind of silly not to start thinking about how can I tap into that economy? How can I begin showing other people that I have value so that I can begin building my digital identity, my personal brand, in a world that other people will begin to value? One of the main benefits of dealing with intangibles is that there's no physical cost. Yes, there's electricity and you have to buy the hardware of a computer or a phone to be able to access the internet. You have to pay for internet. There are some costs associated with it. But if your personal brand is selling something, let's say photos, then I'm able to generate a photo at almost no cost to myself, upload it online at almost no cost, and sell it for $20, $50, $100. And I'm able to get a profit margin on that sale of 90+%, because there's no distribution costs, there's no manufacturing costs, there's no physical costs associated with the development of intangibles. So this actually opens up an infinite supply, potentially, of value to be shared with other people that allows me to have a very high profit margin to develop my personal brand and make a living as part of the creator economy, potentially in the metaverse. And this system is global. It applies to everyone, everywhere in the world, all at once. Everything, everywhere, all at once. And this system operates 24/7. There's no on and off to the internet. It's just always there. So I'm able to operate in what's called an asynchronous way, where I don't have to tie my time to money. I can create a digital product, post it online, and it can just sit there, and someone who's in a completely different time zone than me can still purchase that while I'm sleeping. And this is where we start to get into the concept of passive income, where I'm able to generate an upfront value from a digital product, for example, and I'm able to post it online, or perhaps through YouTube, for example. And over time, it begins to develop an increase in value. It accumulates value. And I don't have to do anything to keep it going. All I have to do is try and increase the traffic to that particular product so that it generates more value as part of the myth of Wanderloots, so that I can continue to make money on this over time. In a sense, it's a really natural extension from what we're doing with personal brands in real life, but we're able to decouple it from time. We don't have to spend time for money. We don't have to trade those two. We can spend time to create something upfront, decouple it from the value that we're generating, and have it sit asynchronously online forever. The more we do this, whenever we create something, which I talk about in my second video, everyone is a creator, the more we create, the more we generate intellectual property. The more we improve our knowledge and create products, articles, books, emails, the more we accumulate intellectual property that's associated to my personal brand. And again, when I tap it into my digital identity, the more that digital identity generates value over time, the more others perceive its value. And the digital identity is effectively a way to maintain a continuity of self across the creator economy, across the internet. We're able to generate a single source of all of these creations that we can link back to so that people begin to trust who we are as individuals. This single source, the single place from which all of these creations are coming from, is probably something that you're accustomed to as part of the knowledge economy, as part of the corporate world. You have your in real life identity, which is associated with your name, and you use that identity to generate experience and value as part of the corporation, as part of the knowledge economy over time. People begin to trust who you are as a person and the skills and the value that you have to present to them. As you become more consistent with the information, the knowledge that you're sharing, the more your trust increases. Effectively, you can think of it as your experience plus your knowledge generates value over time. And if you want to augment that value, if you want to increase it drastically, you're able to connect that personal brand that you've been developing in real life to your digital identity that will generate value for you across the internet. The easiest way to think of this is perhaps through LinkedIn, if you're working in the corporate world, and if you're in the creator world, it's probably through Instagram. Both of these are examples of digital identities that are tied to perhaps an in real life identity. So you're able to generate a network, an audience of people that understand the shared value, the myth that is you, that is me. One of the main benefits of doing this is that you don't have to be limited to a specific geographical location. I don't have to just operate out of Toronto. I can talk to people in India or China or Australia or Europe. There's so many different people all over the world. I can begin to generate an audience of people that value my particular story that I have shared with them, so that over time, my digital identity increases in value and I'm able to make a living doing this. This is what I'm trying to do through YouTube. I'm able to share value with other people and also to future me. And over time, as I begin to monetize YouTube, hopefully, I'm able to generate ad revenue and brand partnerships and promote my digital products. And I'm able to generate a story and generate value associated with that story that other people also believe is valuable. Speaking of which, if you're finding this video helpful or any of my other videos helpful, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to my channel. In order to monetize, I have to reach 1,000 subscribers and get 4,000 watch hours. That's part of YouTube's partnership program. So if you find this useful, if you find value in it, you can show support by subscribing or by sharing with a friend. If you think there's someone else that would find this content interesting, I would really appreciate if you could help share my story. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, okay, that's all well and good. This whole system makes sense. I understand the connection between the creator economy and the knowledge economy and how it forms a digital identity. But why would other people value what I have to say? Who cares what I have to say? And the answer to that is, who knows? The only way that you figure it out is by sharing your story and trying to see who resonates with the message that you're sharing. The only way that other people are going to value what you have to say is if you say it in the first place, if you share it. The more you share this message, the more you share your story and your value, the more you accumulate intellectual property. But the intellectual property is only valuable if other people perceive it as valuable. This is where you have to go through trial and error and practice sharing your message, sharing your value, sharing your story, and see what works and what doesn't work. And over time, you'll recalibrate your message. You'll recalibrate your story, your perception of yourself, your projection of yourself online, so that you're able to find what other people find valuable. And the way that you do this is through trust. So now let's get into part 3, which is how do you actually build this digital identity? How do you build your personal brand and digitize it in a way that other people trust you enough to generate value, whether through following, sharing, liking, watching the videos, purchasing your product, or perhaps consulting based on the information that you've shared as part of your knowledge? And the answer is that there's no one way to do this. Every single person has a different story and they have a different way that they like to share that story. This is where in the last video I touch on the hero's journey and the concept of going from the ordinary world, the world that we're all aware of, and traveling into the unknown. We generate value by experiencing new things and then sharing that value back to people in the ordinary world, the hero's journey. I'm not going to get too deep into that in this video because I talked about it more in depth in the last one. So if you're interested in learning more about the hero's journey as a story structure, please check out that video. Effectively, what you're doing is as you go from the ordinary world and into the unknown, as you explore what it means to be you, you generate experience over time. The more that you share that experience as a form of story, the more you generate a myth, a shared concept that other people also understand. The more you develop a brand associated with the identity that is sharing that story, your digital identity. And it can seem kind of daunting at first. A lot of people go to start sharing on social media and they're like, oh, but I'm not getting any likes, I'm not getting any followers, I'm not getting any subscribers. And I'm not saying that this is an easy thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's the same as working at a corporation for 10 years to build your credibility over time so that people understand who you are and the value that you have to offer. But the faster you start, the quicker you start experimenting, the more you can recalibrate your experience and your story, and the faster your value will increase. You'll also learn a lot about yourself along the way. And I think that's one of the most important aspects of generating a digital identity, is that the digital identity is someone or something that's sharing a story over time. It's the story of you as an individual or a part of you. It doesn't have to be the whole you. But if you don't know what your own story is, if you don't know who you are or what you want to do, if you don't have vision on what you would like in life and what value you would like others to perceive in you, well, they're going to be confused. And it's going to be hard because there's no consistency in the way that you're sharing your message. So other people won't trust you. That trust has to be earned over time in the same way that it does in the corporate world, in the knowledge economy. The best way to figure out what that story is, what your self story is, what that continuity of yourself is to practice sharing it. Share value for free. It doesn't have to be something that you hold back and, oh, okay, I've learned this over my life and I need to start selling this right away for $100. Well, if people don't know who you are, they're not going to buy the product from you. You have to do some work to build up the perception of that digital identity. And you have to build up the value that other people see in you. The easiest way to do this is to share your story for free. Start for free and use it as a way to generate data, see what units of meaning you're sharing with other people and what resonates with them so that you're better able to combine and compile that information into an even more valuable product that you're able to sell to the audience that you've already built. It's a different way of thinking than the traditional corporate world where we think about generating a product and then coming up with an audience that we can sell that product to. It's flipping it. It's building an audience first and then sharing value to them in a way that they can exchange value back with you, whether that's through following, liking, sharing, saving, or purchasing things through a transaction. And the way that you build this audience is by sharing your knowledge or sharing your value, whether it could be through art, for example. I can share my photography, I can share my calming YouTube videos, I can share content on mindfulness and how to improve your mental health. I can teach people about what I've gone through as part of my burnout journey and why I quit my job as an intellectual property lawyer and a patent agent, why I didn't pursue a career in engineering even though I love science and physics, why I'm now stepping into the creator economy more so that I can share my value with more people than I could if I stayed within the corporate ecosystem. I'm able to spread that message with a larger audience. And that audience over time is going to begin to trust what I have to say them, in part because of the credibility indicators I just listed, but in part because I consistently share that value over time. I'm able to build a foundation of knowledge, of consistent art style, something that people can look at and it doesn't come across as unknown, as something that triggers a fear. It's something that remains in the ordinary world. It's something that they're used to, that they feel familiar with. They understand who I am as an individual and the digital identity that's associated with that individual. Over time, as I share that message with more and more people, as I practice telling my story, I'm able to connect my different ideas together. I'm able to start figuring out what is more valuable, not just to others, but also to me. And the more I can double down on the things that I find valuable, the more exponentially that value is going to increase, and hopefully the more value that you will find as my audience. So thank you. And one of the best ways to start, in my experience, is to start researching, start sharing value on what are called evergreen topics. These are subject matters, they're topics that are related to things that people will always find valuable. If you're able to make a YouTube video that people will find valuable in 10 years, that means over 10 years, the YouTube video will increase in watch time and it will compound over time. The power of gains over time is massive. There's the concept from Atomic Habits, which is 1% better every day, is 37 times better than last year. If you're able to generate value and package it in a way that people will find valuable over the course of your life, then the more you put time and energy into generating that evergreen content, the more it will build and compound over time, and the more value you will begin to generate that will hopefully help set you free from income requirements so that you can find financial freedom, which is one of my main goals. If you think about myth, like I mentioned at the beginning, some myths are thousands of years old. Stoicism, a philosophy, it's still applicable today, perhaps more than ever. Some topics really resonate with people on a fundamentally human level, and they're able to span the course of human history. The more you can tap into those types of topics, at least at the beginning, to generate foundational content, the more you'll generate value that has long-lasting impact. That's part of the reason why my newsletter is called Recalibrating, and why I started by exploring Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I figured recalibrate, to change. Change is the only constant in life. The more I can tap into understanding what it means to change and how to get through that change without stressing out, without burning out, without overthinking, without dysregulating, then hopefully the better I will be throughout the rest of my life. And hopefully the people that are watching these videos and understanding the message and the philosophy of recalibrating, the better they will be over time as well. As you build up this base of foundational content, you'll be able to start touching on more modern topics. You'll be able to tap into certain topics that are much more hyped, that will be searched on social media and searched on, for example, YouTube or Google. So you'll get big boosts in engagement because you're tapping on a topic that is very timely and newsworthy. So this can be considered agile content versus foundational content. And if this sounds confusing, I'll get more into this in a later video. But the idea is that you're building a repertoire, you're building a different toolkit that you're able to put into your backpack of your digital identity and go walk through the creator economy and the metaverse. As you develop these evergreen topics, what you can do is you can share that information with people that are 2 steps behind you on the path of self-actualization, on the path of figuring out who they are. I am a couple steps ahead of other people, so I can take the knowledge that I've generated in this time now, that's a couple months ahead of the person behind me, bundle it into a package and send it back to that person from me 2 months ago and what I would find helpful. So I'm able to keep track of the journey as I walk on it, generating value packets that I can leave as breadcrumbs for people that follow behind. Hopefully, so that instead of taking 2 months to get to where I am, maybe it only takes them 2 weeks, because I've gone through and solved a lot of the problems that you are struggling with now. As you build these breadcrumbs, as you come up with these packets of intellectual property, you'll start seeing what the bigger picture is that you're building towards. You don't need to know what the end goal is, but you can know generally what the direction is. And the more you test out when you're sharing your story, the more you'll begin to figure out what direction do I actually want to head in. You can calibrate your internal compass so that you know more and more confidently the direction that you want to head. Over time, as you generate these pieces, these knowledge packets, this information, the intellectual property, you'll start piecing it together into the puzzle that is the bigger picture. And you'll start seeing this vision yourself, and you'll find yourself feeling more confident in who you are as an individual. This whole concept of the bigger picture is something that I was actually working on with my friend, Julia Gardner. She's a fantastic photographer and videographer and travel creator, so I highly recommend checking out her videos. They're beautiful. And we worked on a podcast where we talked about digital identity. We talk about what it means to tell story and what it means to generate value through art and build an audience, a natural audience that you really resonate with. And we also talk a little bit about NFTs and crypto and how to build your digital identity in what's called a self-sovereign way, but I'll touch on more on that later. So if you're interested, I recommend checking out the podcast. It's got a ton of valuable information. I don't want to make it sound like this is an easy thing to do. It will take time, it will take energy, but the more you're able to align yourself in the story that you're sharing with other people, the truer you'll begin to feel over time, the more aligned with your own value you will be, and the less you will burn out. Now, on that topic, I do want to mention that the creator economy is often touched by the attention economy, which I'll talk about more later, and I have a paper that I wrote on this topic that I'll link in the description below. But effectively, you have to be careful about playing with an algorithm, sharing information and sharing value with something that is not human, deciding whether or not your post gets shown to other people. And if you are sharing things because you want to get high engagement on social media or on YouTube, that's not the right way to do it, because it will lead to burnout over time, and it will lead to potentially depression, anxiety, overthinking, burnout, because you're playing and trying to cater to something that is operating like a slot machine. It's much better to begin working on your message and to figure out what it is that you want to tell people. And over time, you'll become more confident with that. Other people will pick up on it, and the algorithm will get better over time. Don't rush it. It's not worth generating all this anxiety over the algorithm. It's better to come up with something that is a natural expression of yourself, natural self-expression, than to try and play along to an algorithm. I actually have an entire video that talks about burnout recovery, and I talk about this a lot more in my newsletter, where I mention how I burnt out as a lawyer and a patent agent, and why I transitioned to recalibrate my life into the creator economy, why applying Maslow's hierarchy of needs was a great way for me to structure my own burnout recovery. Back to the attention economy. This is often referred to as Web 2, which is what we think of as social media. And part of the reason that people burn out playing the game of the creator economy is because the rules are being set by mega corporations like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Google. and they're the ones that are deciding who gets to see what. If you try playing along to any one set of rules, it becomes very difficult because you're conforming your message. You're putting it into a box that applies in one situation but not in another. It's much more valuable for you to figure out what that message is yourself now, which is what I've done over the last 30 weeks in my newsletter, and then start to share that message across multiple platforms. This is what's called omni-channel marketing. And as another reason for doing this, if Instagram happens to go bankrupt one day, and I built my entire audience on Instagram, well then my digital identity has just lost a ton of value. It's safer for me in the long run to diversify my attention, to diversify my efforts, and decentralize my digital identity, to not have it clumped within a single corporate entity, but to have it split across many of them. The goal of doing this, of this omni-channel marketing, of the diversification, the decentralization of my digital identity, is to build what's called a self-sovereign identity, one that is tied to me as an individual instead of to a particular company or a particular social media account. It's spread across many different channels, but they all link back to me as the foundational core of what that digital identity is. Now, I know this has been a lot of information, so I'll get more into self-sovereignty later. This is where we start getting into NFTs and smart contracts and the ability to tie your digital identity to the blockchain, to something that can't be tampered with over time and is decentralized from all of the different social media platforms. Today we talked about 3 different aspects of digital identity. We talked about why you should care about a digital identity and how it relates to the concept of myth and personal brands. We talked about what a digital identity is and how you're able to generate value that is associated with a personal brand with the digital identity. And we talked about specific practical tips on how you can begin building your digital identity in a way that is natural to the authentic you, so that you can share your story to generate a myth associated with your personal brand, your digital identity. If you found this video helpful, I would really appreciate if you could like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow my channel, I'm trying to monetize it, I'm trying to share my digital identity more with other people so that I can help them as much as possible. So your subscription really means a lot to me and I appreciate it very much. I would also love if you could please share this video with a friend that you think might find it useful. The word of mouth is one of the best ways to help share information, to help build this trust associated with my digital identity, with me, Callum, Wanderloots. In the next video in the Recalibrating series, I'll continue on with the concept of digital identity and self-sovereignty and how you can begin building a sustainable creation system that allows you to build up the value of your digital identity over time in a way that doesn't burn you out. As part of this, I will be tapping into aspects of my newsletter where I talk a lot more in depth on these topics. So if you're interested in getting a bigger picture view of what it is I'm doing here, please consider subscribing to my newsletter. Feel free to leave a comment below. That helps me recalibrate my videos so that I'm better able to address the topics that other people find useful, so that I can hopefully generate some shared value between me and you. I really appreciate your attention and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video.